I'd like to thank so many people. I'd like to thank the Petitions Committee. I'd like to thank the organisations that I met with, including GBGB. If they are here or listening, I really think they do care about dogs. I'd like to thank you for your time. But I would particularly like to pay tribute to those animal charities. I couldn't actually do what you do. It would upset me so much that I think I'd be taking home a dozen animals every night. I'd like to thank also those racetrack volunteers as well. You do that role with such dignity when it must be so upsetting for you. This, for me, is about the sort of Wales we want. I don't want the sort of Wales where animals are produced on an industrial scale for sport. I don't want to be in a Wales where this promotes and encourages betting and gambling. I don't want to be in a Wales where animals are injured. I don't want to be in a Wales where at the end of animals' careers in racing, they go to a dog's home where they wait for people to come along to take them away. That relies on charities, and those charities are here today. They got no funding for that, apart from through the GBGB rehoming bond. And let me just tell you a little bit about this. The GBGB rehoming bond will only go to homes who do not speak out against greyhound racing. That means that there is only one place in Wales that receives the Greyhound Board of Great Britain rehoming bond. I want to just also cover a few other issues as well. Why not regulation? Well, because regulation is still about racing. Regulation is still about producing dogs at the end of that race that need to go to a dog's home and then need rehoming. And actually, regulation will still mean that dogs are raced in temperatures which last year, on August the 12th, were 32 degrees, where the RSPCA were telling dog owners not to take their dogs out for walks. And yet, in a regulated track in Harlow, in Essex, they were racing greyhounds.
Jane, would you take an intervention?
I will.
Based on animal welfare there, and you're talking about animal welfare, I've spoken to quite a few councillors with regards to planning applications, and their frustration is not being able to turn a planning application down on animal welfare reasons. Would you? I'd like to ask the government if they would consider changing planning law so that animal welfare reasons might be a reason to turn down a planning application.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point, and that really hones in on animal welfare issues. And we know actually that the only racetrack in Wales is looking to expand the number of dogs that they have, despite not having planning permission yet. They've been turned down twice. And yet they are building right now. They are building, not even kennels, they are building racks for 200 dogs to go into. And therefore, I do hope that the planning conditions do include animal welfare. I know I must move on, Dir Pryllwydd. The second issue is, people may be asking, is this the thin end of the wedge? If we ban greyhound racing, are we going to move on to horse racing? And I would say, no, we're not. It's a totally different entity. Dogs for greyhound racing are produced on an industrial scale. They do not have owners who care for them and look after them. And that, for me, is the difference in greyhounds. I can't let this time go by without talking about Arthur. You all know about Arthur. It's probably the last time you'll hear about Arthur. Let me tell you about Arthur's experience as far as we know about it, because we don't know an awful lot. Arthur was from a puppy farm in Ireland. How do we know that? Because he had tattoos in both of his ears. Only dogs from Ireland who are going to be raced have tattoos in both of their ears. If they're from England, they have just one ear. Let me tell you how tender and painful that is. As an adult dog, if anybody went near Arthur's ears, he would yelp with pain. It was so painful for him. We do know Arthur sustained an injury on the racetrack. He fell on his neck. He couldn't have anything around his neck. and indeed he would yelp in pain if anybody touched his neck in any way. Arthur spent 6 years in a racetrack and was found in quite squalid conditions by the Dogs Home. He spent 2 years in a Dogs Home before we came along. At the time that we collected Arthur, there were 65 other greyhounds waiting for a home. Arthur stayed with us, as you know, for 3 years. The first year of his time with us was very hard. He was terrified and traumatised by many and most things. Taking him for a walk for a 5-minute route would be about an hour, because he would freeze at any sound or sight that he was anxious about. I know I have to finish, Deirdre, but let me tell you this. I would have Arthur back tomorrow in a flash. But I don't want any more dogs produced that had Arthur's experiences. So I hope you'll support the ban today. Diolch yn fawr iawn.